A 911 call. A teenage voice, trembling. My sister just found them. Two parents shot dead in their bedroom. The caller? Their own daughter. Now the public watches her every move. Is she a mourning child or something more? Sarah Grace Patrick was just 17 years old, living in the quiet town of Chesapeake, Virginia, a place where life slowed down, cul-de-sacs filled with parked bikes, neighbors waved from porches, and the night air carried the hum of cicadas. Her parents, Thomas and Angela, were known around the community as steady, dependable people. Thomas worked long hours in logistics. Angela managed the household with an open-door warmth that made their home the kind of place where kids gathered after school. To neighbors, the Patricks were ordinary in the best way. Church on Sundays, barbecues in the summer, a family who didn't make waves, who lived life by routine. Their home on Willow Creek Lane stood with trimmed hedges, warm lights in the windows, and a sense of comfort that suggested stability. But behind those walls, as often happens, life wasn't picture perfect. Sarah was a bright student, yet restless, balancing the pressures of school, friendships, and the kind of invisible weight that comes with being a teenager straddling childhood and adulthood. She longed for more independence, more space, more freedom from rules she sometimes felt were too tight. The night it happened, the weather was ordinary, a mild October evening, the kind that carried a stillness. Leaves rattled softly along the driveway. From the outside, nothing seemed wrong. Nothing seemed unusual. But inside, something had fractured, something that would soon spill into a crime scene that made national headlines, leaving a community stunned and struggling to understand how violence could erupt in a house so ordinary, and why one name, Sarah's, would soon be whispered with suspicion. Looking back, there were whispers, small, almost dismissible moments that only gained weight after the tragedy. Neighbors remembered seeing Sarah pacing the driveway that evening, phone clutched tight, a frown she didn't usually wear. It seemed normal at the time. Teen stress, perhaps a disagreement with friends, but in hindsight, it was the first crack in the facade. Her best friend recalled an odd text exchange earlier that day. Sarah had joked about her parents being too controlling, a remark that now sounded eerily prescient. At the time, it was teenage rebellion. Later, it felt like a clue. Even her teachers noticed a shift. Once diligent and cheerful, Sarah had grown quiet, distracted, almost withdrawn. Assignments that were usually turned in on time came late, and she seemed preoccupied. They chalked it up to senior year stress, unaware that tension in the home had begun to build in ways that would soon explode. Meanwhile, small household incidents, doors left unlocked, objects out of place, arguments overheard through thin walls, were easy to overlook, ordinary signs. Yet pieced together after the fact, they formed a ladder of suspicion, each rung a subtle indicator that something was amiss, something that community wasn't yet ready to see. By nightfall, the atmosphere around the Patrick household had thickened. Silence replaced casual chatter. Shadows stretched longer than usual, and the familiar hum of the neighborhood felt distant, as if everyone instinctively held their breath. The stage was set, the cracks visible only in retrospect, and the ordinary night was about to be anything but. The call came in just after 9:30 p.m., a voice trembling with fear, urgency, and something harder to place, shock. My parents, they're not moving, Sarah whispered to the 911 operator. Her words stumbled over themselves, her breath catching in ragged bursts. Behind her, the living room light flickered, casting long shadows over the furniture, as if the house itself were recoiling from the truth.
When first responders arrived, the scene was chilling in its quietness. The house was intact. No signs of forced entry, no struggle visible in the main areas. Yet in the bedroom, tragedy had struck with ruthless finality. Thomas and Angela Patrick had been shot, both. Their lives ended in an instant, leaving a silence so deep it felt almost physical, pressing on the responders' chests. Neighbors gathered outside, drawn by the flashing lights, the low murmur of voices, the faint scent of smoke from a neighbor's barbecue lingering in the night air. Whispers rippled through the crowd. How could this happen here, in this quiet neighborhood, in a house so ordinary? Sarah sat on the front porch, wrapped in a blanket offered by a kind neighbor, her hair tangled, eyes wide and unseeing. She answered questions in short, fractured sentences. She claimed to have discovered the bodies, yet the look in her eyes, a mix of sorrow, confusion, and something else, made some officers pause. The world tilted. A family known for stability and warmth was now the epicenter of national headlines. The ordinary night, with its cicadas and rustling leaves, had transformed into a nightmare. And while the public mourned, investigators began to notice the subtle inconsistencies, timing, statements, movements, that would soon complicate what everyone assumed was a straightforward tragedy. The first domino had fallen. The story was no longer just about loss. It was about unraveling a truth far more complex than anyone expected. As investigators sifted through the Patrick household, a pattern emerged. Small, disjointed fragments that painted a picture no one had expected. Sarah Grace Patrick, the dutiful daughter seen by neighbors and teachers, had been leading a double life. Her social media profiles, previously unremarkable, now revealed late-night chats with strangers, cryptic messages deleted almost immediately, and connections that hinted at secret interactions far outside the scope of her small-town life. It wasn't enough to condemn, but enough to raise questions. School friends recalled her disappearing for hours, claiming errands or study sessions. Bank statements and location data showed inconsistencies that didn't align with her stories. Each discrepancy, once insignificant, now built tension, like cracks forming in a glass ceiling, threatening to shatter under pressure. Even more striking were her interviews with police. Sarah's recounting of that night contained subtle contradictions. Her demeanor, controlled in some moments, tearful in others, began to suggest a complexity that reporters and detectives struggled to parse. Was this the trauma of witnessing an unimaginable scene, or a carefully constructed performance? Neighbors who once described her as shy and quiet now wondered if they had truly known her at all. The girl they saw in the driveway, pacing with a phone in hand, was only a fragment of the truth. A curated image hiding questions that would soon dominate headlines. This revelation didn't provide closure. It deepened the mystery. Suddenly, Sarah was not just a grieving teenager. She became the axis around which suspicion, scrutiny, and speculation would revolve. And in that shift, the narrative transformed from tragedy to enigma, from loss to a puzzle the nation demanded to solve. In the days following the shooting, Chesapeake felt the weight of the Patrick tragedy like a storm pressing on the town's shoulders. Police tape cordoned off the street, its yellow ribbons fluttering against the mild October wind. Reporters' cameras reflected off the windows of the family home, while neighbors whispered behind drawn curtains, each voice carrying shock, speculation, and fear. Detectives returned to the Patrick house regularly, cataloging every detail: the angle of the bedroom's doors, fingerprints on picture frames, and the peculiar placement of objects that seemed out of place. Every seemingly minor observation, Sarah's half-finished homework, the untouched family dinner, a purse left in the hallway, was meticulously recorded and examined.
A neighbor recounted hearing what sounded like a heated exchange between Sarah and her father a week prior. At the time, it was dismissed as typical teenage frustration. Now, investigators revisited the memory with new eyes. Every argument, every raised voice became a possible piece of the puzzle. Electronic evidence added layers of complexity. Sarah's phone contained deleted messages and app activity that didn't match her statements. Location data conflicted with her account of that evening. Bank records showed unusual withdrawals, small sums that hinted at planning, or perhaps an attempt to distance herself from her parents' accounts. Each new lead wasn't just a clue, it was a riddle twisting what was once simple grief into suspicion and doubt. Community reaction intensified. Online forums and social media exploded with debates. Was this a grieving teenager caught in the wrong moment, or someone hiding darker motives? Reddit threads dissected photos of Sarah from school events, analyzing facial expressions, body language, and clothing choices, each interpretation a reflection of collective unease. Extended family interviews added emotional complexity. Some remembered Sarah as dutiful and obedient. Others noted moments of tension, secrecy, or rebellion. The contradictions multiplied like mirrors, reflecting an incomplete, fractured story. Detectives were forced to navigate a labyrinth of conflicting memories, unspoken family dynamics, and the pressure of a public demanding answers. Time itself became a weapon. Every hour brought new leads, new rumors, and mounting pressure from the media and the community. Officers worked around the clock, piecing together a narrative that refused to be simple. What began as a tragic night had evolved into a layered, almost theatrical puzzle. Grief interwoven with suspicion, secrecy, and the unnerving question, who could you truly trust in the shadow of a sudden, violent death? Weeks of investigation came to a head, one gray, drizzling morning. The Chesapeake Police Department assembled evidence with surgical precision. Phone records, bank statements, witness statements, and digital footprints that collectively pointed toward a chilling reality. Sarah sat in an interview room, the hum of fluorescent lights above her echoing in the silence. Detectives presented the inconsistencies one by one. Her voice wavered at first, a fragile tremor, then hardened as each question peeled away layers of her carefully maintained persona. A crucial breakthrough arrived in the form of a deleted text thread recovered from her phone. The conversation, time-stamped just hours before the tragedy, hinted at conflict and desperation. Unseen by anyone outside her private world. Patterns emerged, a subtle but unmistakable tension between autonomy and control, secrecy and exposure. When confronted with the evidence, Sarah's silence spoke volumes. It wasn't theatrical defiance or outright confession. It was the weight of a truth too heavy for words, the kind of silence that presses in on everyone in the room. Detectives felt it, journalists sensed it, and the community following the case from afar hung on every carefully curated update. The town, which had begun to piece together their own narratives, suddenly realized that the story they believed, the grieving daughter discovering a tragic loss, was only part of a far more complex reality. Motive, opportunity, and consequence intertwined in ways that shattered the comforting simplicity of ordinary tragedy. Outside, the drizzle had turned into a steady rain. Streetlights glinted off wet asphalt, and the quiet hum of distant traffic felt almost ceremonial. For Chesapeake, the climax of the investigation was not just the revelation of what happened, it was the confrontation with human complexity. with how secrets and misunderstandings can erupt into consequences no one could have anticipated. And as the pieces finally aligned, the community faced a stark, uncomfortable truth. In the shadows of grief and daily life, darkness can hide in the most familiar faces, waiting for the smallest fissure to widen into catastrophe. In the weeks after the investigation reached its turning point, Chesapeake struggled to find normalcy. The Patrick family retreated from public view, their private grief now complicated by scrutiny, speculation, and the painful weight of unanswered questions. Community meetings were held, some to honor the victims of the shooting, others to discuss safety and support for families. Yet beneath polite nods and carefully prepared statements, an unspoken tension lingered. People whispered about trust, secrecy, and the fragility of appearances. The girl next door, once thought familiar and predictable, had revealed layers that no neighbor could have anticipated. Journalists reflected on the nuances of reporting such a complex case, how quickly the line between fact and speculation can blur, and how social media amplifies suspicion faster than investigation. Every photograph, every social media post, every small detail became a potential clue or a source of misinformation, demonstrating the modern challenge of separating truth from perception. For law enforcement, the case reinforced the need for meticulous evidence collection and patience. It highlighted how minor contradictions, small secrets, and overlooked details can collectively form a crucial narrative. Officers acknowledged that tragedy often carries dimensions invisible at first glance, requiring both procedural rigor and empathetic understanding. The moral thread that tied the community's reflection together was unsettling but vital. Appearances are fragile, trust is precious, and even those closest to us can conceal struggles or motives we might never fully understand. Sarah Grace Patrick's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that grief, secrecy, and human complexity can collide in ways that ripple far beyond a single household. Sarah Grace Patrick's story leaves us with more questions than answers. Was this a tragic outcome of hidden struggles and miscommunication, or were there deeper motives that remain partially unseen? As you watch this unfold, think about the people in your own life. How well do we really know those closest to us, and how often do we ignore the subtle signs of conflict or distress? Do you believe the warning signs in cases like Sarah's are ever truly preventable, or are some tragedies inevitable no matter how alert we are? Share your thoughts. Could early intervention, open dialogue, or stronger community awareness have changed the outcome? Or do you think some human complexities remain beyond our ability to fully understand or control? The conversation doesn't end here, it's just beginning.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more gripping true crime breakdowns, mysteries, and criminal psychology stories, only on Twisted Case.